My name is Martin, and today I will share an incredible story of one of our dear subscribers, Harper Lewis, a renowned astrologer. Harper's life took an unimaginable turn in early 2025 when she experienced a near-death incident that transformed everything she thought she knew about life, death, and the universe. What she saw and learned in those moments will challenge everything you know about the world we live in and what is yet to come. Harper's experience revealed hidden truths about the future, including a cosmic shift that will mark the end of a 26,000-year cycle. Let's dive into Harper's extraordinary journey. It was February 21, 2025, a cold yet clear night. Harper Lewis had just finished a long day of sessions with clients. Being a fairly well-known astrologer, her days were often filled with consultations and detailed readings of astrological charts. In recent weeks, she had been feeling more tired than usual, as if something strange had changed in the energy around her. It was as if the cosmos had transformed, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly what had happened. After closing her laptop and having her last cup of tea, Harper decided to visit a close friend. The trip was supposed to be quick, only 15 minutes, but something about that night felt different. The sky was darker than usual, and the stars seemed to pulsate with an intensity she had never noticed before. It was as if they were trying to send her a message. She was driving along a familiar road when, suddenly, something unexpected happened. A large truck veered into her lane. Harper had only enough time to see the blinding headlights before the impact. The sound of twisting metal and shattering glass filled her ears as the car violently spun off the road. Her head hit the side window and then, silence. She remembered the sensation of her body going limp, her breathing slowing, and the sound of her heart fading away. The cold night air invaded her skin until everything stopped. There was no fear, only an absolute silence. Harper knew she was dying. In the distance, she could hear muffled voices, the flashing lights of an ambulance blinking through her closed eyelids. The paramedics were working on her body, but Harper felt herself drifting away as if her soul were detaching. She knew that somehow her life as she knew it was coming to an end. There was no panic, only a feeling of surrender. In that moment, Harper felt an invisible force, as if something were pulling her upward. She could see everything from above, the twisted wreckage of her car, the paramedics desperately trying to resuscitate her, and the blue and red lights flashing in the darkness of the road. It was surreal, like watching a movie from outside her own body. Suddenly, a wave of warmth enveloped Harper, a soft light that grew increasingly intense until it completely filled her being. She felt surrounded by a living energy, radiant with warmth and peace. There was no fear. On the contrary, for the first time in her life, Harper felt completely at peace. As she floated upward, the scene below her began to fade, the accident, the lights, the paramedics, until everything dissolved into the distance. All that remained was that light and an overwhelming sense of love and tranquility. It was then that she realized she was leaving the physical world behind and entering something entirely different. Harper floated in a weightless space, enveloped in a pure, intense light. It wasn't sunlight nor artificial. It was something alive, as if the light itself had energy, vibrated and possessed an essence. She felt no fear. In fact, it was the most comforting sensation she had ever experienced. And as she ascended, the scene below her faded slowly, giving way to something more vast, deeper, and more divine. The peace that enveloped her was absolute. It was then that Harper noticed the presence of something, or someone, nearby. At first it was a subtle sensation, as if something familiar were close, a wave of warmth and welcome. Then, she heard a voice. It wasn't loud, but it possessed a gentle authority, filled with love. "Harper," the voice said. She turned toward the sound and saw a figure emerging from the light. It was Jesus. There was no doubt in her mind. His presence radiated such deep love and absolute understanding that tears began to well up in her eyes. Even though she no longer had a physical body, Jesus extended his hand, and Harper, almost without thinking, approached. "Come with me," he said softly. When she touched his hand, she felt a wave of warmth and energy flow through her being. It was as if all the pain, confusion, and fear she had ever felt in life vanished at once. As they moved through the light, Harper began to see shapes and colors forming around them. Visions of her life, moments of happiness and pain, things she had forgotten, all presented without judgment, only understanding and compassion. Then, Jesus spoke again. You are not here by chance. And it was at that moment that the true revelation began. What she was about to see did not pertain only to her life, but to the future of humanity. The light around them began to change. The warmth and peace remained, but now Harper felt that something profound was about to be revealed. The ground beneath her feet seemed to glow, and the air was filled with a golden shimmer. The light appeared to come from all directions at once. Then Jesus turned to her and said, "Look." As the air before her rippled, Harper saw images beginning to take shape. She saw the earth, its people and events yet to come. In a vast cosmic clock, the hands were rapidly moving toward midnight. The earth pulsed with a tension she had never felt before. Jesus explained that the world was approaching the end of a 26,000-year cosmic cycle, a moment of change that would bring massive transformations, both spiritual and physical. The energy of this cycle is coming to an end, he said, and what comes next will test the faith of humanity. Harper witnessed scenes of a future where people lived in a world of advanced technology. Small implants in their hands allowed them to purchase food, access information, and connect with systems on a biological level. But although it appeared to be progress, Jesus warned, it may look like progress, but it will be the greatest deception humanity has ever faced. Then, Harper observed a great division. Some people embraced this new technology, living comfortably, under control, while others rejected it and were marginalized by society. They would live in distinct worlds, one enveloped in artificial order, and the other, struggling yet spiritually awakened. They will have to choose, Jesus said. Harper turned to him, seeing in Jesus's deep and wise eyes a love so intense it made her tremble. "Lord," she asked, "why show me this?" "Because you are one of the chosen," he replied, "and you must tell them." Harper's soul trembled under the weight of such responsibility. "But who will believe me?" she asked. "Those who have ears to hear will listen," Jesus answered. Then he led her through further visions. Harper saw how people would initially embrace this technology with enthusiasm. At first, it would offer solutions to common problems, economic stability, access to health care, security, but soon they would realize the price, the loss of individual freedom. The implants would begin to alter people's thoughts, emotions, and even their spiritual perception. It would become increasingly difficult to hear the voice of God, and the connection with the Holy Spirit would weaken. "Those who reject it will be protected," Jesus said, "but they will face difficulties. Yet I will be with them." "It's time for you to return," Jesus told Harper. "But how will I share this with the world?" she asked, still full of doubts. "Speak the truth," he replied, "and I will take care of the rest." Suddenly, the light that surrounded her began to fade, and Harper felt herself being pulled downward. In the next moment, she woke up, breathing with difficulty. With paramedics still around her, her life would never be the same. In the days following her near-death experience, the memory of what Jesus had shown her remained vivid, as if it had just happened. The spiritual clarity she felt was indescribable. It wasn't just the future she had seen, but the true nature of life and existence. One night, while she was trying to process everything she had experienced, the visions returned, not as hallucinations but as flashes of spiritual truths. She saw how every moment of her life was connected to a greater plan. Every choice, every mistake, and even the smallest acts of kindness had been woven into a vast cosmic tapestry that extended beyond time. During her encounter with Jesus, Harper saw scenes from her own life. She remembered moments from her childhood, like when she was alone at the playground, feeling abandoned. However, in that vision, she noticed something she had never seen before. An angel was by her side, comforting her, even when she couldn't feel it. She also recalled the day her father left the family, leaving her mother to face the hardships alone. In that moment, Harper felt abandoned by God, but now, in the vision, she realized that God was there, strengthening her mother's heart and guiding her steps through the storm. Moreover, Harper saw how the choices of others had impacted her life. A simple act of kindness from a stranger, years ago, had set off a chain reaction that eventually led her to a life-changing opportunity. A woman had held the door for her when she was running late for a college interview. If that door had closed, she would have missed the interview. But because of the stranger's kindness, she arrived in time and was accepted into the program that trained her as an astrologer. Jesus explained to Harper that nothing in life is random. Every encounter, every challenge, and every moment of joy is part of a spiritual plan that guides humanity. Then Jesus revealed something even deeper, the collective purpose of humanity. He showed Harper that human beings were not created merely to survive or accumulate material wealth, but to grow spiritually, to reconnect with the divine, and to help others awaken to their true nature. She saw that every human soul carries a part of God's essence. When people live in alignment with that divine nature, through love, truth, and service, they become powerful beacons of light. But when they stray from that divine nature, through greed, hatred, and fear, they become spiritually fragmented. Jesus explained to Harper that the change about to occur in 2025 was part of a greater cosmic plan. Humanity was approaching a turning point, a final test that would determine whether they would awaken to their divine potential or fall into spiritual darkness. Harper realized that her life and the lives of everyone around her were not insignificant. Every thought, every word, every action had a profound impact. The choices humanity would make in the coming years would shape not only the future of the earth, but of all spiritual existence. As Harper reflected on all this, she felt a growing weight of responsibility. Jesus had shown her the true purpose of life, and now she knew that it was her mission to live according to that purpose. A week after her near-death experience, Harper began to notice a strange sensitivity to energy. She could feel the changes in the atmosphere, subtle vibrations that most people would not be able to perceive. It was as if the universe itself were pulsating with an invisible tension. She started having vivid dreams. In her dreams, she saw a huge cosmic clock suspended in the sky, its hands moving rapidly toward an invisible deadline. Sometimes the clock would break and dissolve into light. Other times, it would transform into chaotic darkness. Harper knew that it wasn't just a dream, it was a warning. Jesus had shown her the cosmic timeline during her near-death experience. He explained that humanity was living in a 26,000-year cycle, an era linked to the alignment of the Earth with the galactic center. This cycle had influenced human consciousness, spiritual evolution, and the rise and fall of civilizations. Harper saw how ancient cultures already knew about this cycle, such as the Mayans, the Egyptians, and the Hopi, who tracked cosmic patterns, knowing that the end of the cycle would bring massive changes in human consciousness. But the change of 2025 would be different from anything that had happened before. In her vision, Harper saw the Earth positioned at a crucial point in the galactic field. Energies coming from the center of the galaxy were flooding the planet, creating a shift in humanity's spiritual frequency. It was as if the Earth's vibrational field were being recalibrated, preparing for either an awakening or a collapse. Jesus explained that this change would expose everything hidden beneath the surface, not only political and economic issues but also spiritual ones. People's true intentions, their shadows, and their spiritual forces would be brought to light. Harper saw how this change would create two distinct realities. Those who aligned with the higher spiritual frequency would experience a profound awakening, becoming more intuitive, more sensitive to energy, and more connected to divine truth. Miracles would become more common, healing would accelerate, and manifestation would become easier. But those who resisted the change, clinging to control, greed, and fear, would begin to see their spiritual consciousness close off. They would become increasingly dependent on external systems, technology, government, and material structures, and find themselves trapped in a reality defined by an artificial order, disconnected from spiritual truth. Jesus showed Harper that the end of the 26,000-year cycle would not be a single event, but something that would unfold over months and years. 2025 would be the turning point. The decisions made in that year would define the trajectory of human consciousness for centuries. The cosmic clock that Harper saw in her visions was not symbolic. It was real. The change was happening now, and humanity had little time to choose the path it would follow. Jesus also revealed to Harper how the transition would begin, not through war or violence, but through convenience. In her vision, she saw a society where people no longer needed phones or credit cards. Instead, they had small implants under their skin that allowed them to access money, healthcare, and instant communication. The implants were promoted as a solution to modern problems, a way to protect against identity theft, improve medical care, and make life more efficient. Initially, people embraced them enthusiastically, as it was easier than remembering passwords or carrying cash. Banks and governments supported the idea, and even churches accepted it, saying it was merely technology, not something spiritual. But Jesus showed Harper the spiritual consequences. The implant was not just a tool, it was a direct connection to a control system. It altered brain chemistry, making people more suggestible, more obedient. Subtle signals were transmitted through the implant, influencing thoughts, emotions, and even beliefs. Harper saw how those who accepted the implant began to change. They became more dependent on the system. Prayer became more difficult. Intuition weakened, and the connection with God seemed to vanish. The enemy will not force humanity into this system, Jesus said. He will lure them into it. The deception will be subtle and gradual. It will be presented as progress, a pathway to a better world. The enemy knows that my people would reject an obvious evil. In her vision, Harper saw how the system evolved. The implants became more sophisticated, eventually integrating into the human nervous system. Governments claimed it was to improve public health and prevent diseases. Banks said it was to protect financial systems. Corporations stated it was to increase efficiency. But Jesus revealed the truth to Harper. It was all about control. Those with the implant could be tracked in real time. Their emotions could be chemically adjusted, and their thoughts influenced. Those who refused to accept the implant would be excluded from society. They wouldn't be able to work, buy food, or access medical care. Harper saw how families would be divided because of that decision. She saw churches splitting apart. The implant was not just physical, it was spiritual. What appeared to be a technological advancement carried a profound spiritual consequence. Harper saw how the introduction of the implant would further divide humanity. Those who accepted the implant would have an easier life. Transactions would be faster, medical care would be instantaneous and predictive, and travel would be simplified. No need for identification or money. People would feel safer and more connected to the global system. But beneath the surface, something was beginning to change. She observed how the implant influenced people's emotions and thoughts. Those who accepted it started to lose their spiritual perception. They became more conformist, less questioning, and their ability to discern spiritual truth faded. In one vision, Harper saw how conversations among friends and family began to change. People who were once thoughtful and independent started to repeat rehearsed responses. Their thoughts were no longer completely their own. Their emotions seemed more calculated, and the light in their eyes disappeared. She saw families sitting at the table, but instead of engaging in meaningful conversations, they were receiving subtle suggestions through the implants. The system dictated what to say, what to eat, and even how to feel. Children who grew up with the implant didn't even know there was another way to live. To them, this artificial guidance seemed normal. Meanwhile, those who rejected the implant faced growing resistance. At first, it was just social pressure. They were labeled as paranoid, outdated, resistant to progress. But then, the pressure increased. Financial systems began to operate only for those who had the implant. Employers started to require the implant for access to secure facilities. Schools began to demand the implant for enrollment. Medical service providers denied care to those without it. Harper saw how entire communities were reshaped. In neighborhoods where people accepted the implant, life became efficient and organized, but soulless. There was no spiritual warmth, no authenticity. In contrast, in communities where people rejected the implant, the struggle was constant. Supplies were scarce, infrastructure was collapsing, and resources were being cut. Yet despite all this, Harper saw something remarkable. Light emanated from these people. They had chosen the path of God. Harper saw how those who rejected the implant were protected, not by physical strength, but by spiritual strength. Even though they were isolated and without access to modern technologies, they were deeply connected to the divine. They were guided by faith, praying together, supporting one another and sharing resources. Harper witnessed that even without powerful material structures, divine light surrounded them, strengthening their resistance. They didn't need physical security, because they were spiritually protected. On the other hand, those who accepted the implant initially appeared to prosper. Their lives became easier and more stable, but at what cost? Behind the facade of comfort and order, their connection with God began to wither. Prayers turned empty, the presence of the Holy Spirit disappeared, and deep down, They were losing their spiritual freedom in exchange for material comfort. Jesus told Harper, "They have traded spiritual freedom for worldly convenience." The division became even clearer. Those who accepted the implant were immersed in a controlled system, their lives smooth and orderly, yet spiritually empty. Those who rejected the implant faced difficulties and isolation, but they carried an inner light that could not be extinguished. Jesus explained that among those who rejected the system there would be a special group, the chosen ones. These were the individuals who would refuse to subject their souls to control, even if it meant losing everything. They were extraordinary souls, endowed with an inner strength that made them immune to external influences. Jesus further explained that these chosen ones had been spiritually prepared for this moment since before they were born. Their hearts and minds held the memory of ancient wisdom, and they were placed on earth at this very moment to help humanity see the truth. They would be simple, ordinary people, teachers, farmers, nurses, young adults, even children. Yet despite their simplicity, they carried an unshakable spiritual authority. These chosen ones gathered in small groups, praying together, receiving guidance from the Holy Spirit, and their prayers created waves of spiritual change that affected the environment around them. Harper saw how these chosen ones operated in her visions. Although their gatherings were small, the strength of their prayers and their connection with God generated powerful spiritual waves that affected the atmosphere around them. They did not fight with weapons as other groups might attempt, but with truth. Jesus said, "They will not fight with weapons, but with truth." These chosen ones did not seek to overthrow governments or destabilize society. They simply refused to participate in the system, rejected the implant, distanced themselves from material structures, and lived outside modern technology. Harper observed how these chosen ones inspired others. Their peace, spiritual strength, and authority attracted those who were beginning to question the system. Those who had initially accepted the implant started to doubt. Some even managed to reverse the damage by turning to God in repentance. The light of these chosen ones began to expose the surrounding shadows, bringing the truth to light, even though many refused to see it. Jesus showed Harper that the implant was not merely a technological issue but part of a deeper spiritual war. The enemy's true objective was not to control human behavior, but to control souls. The enemy knew that by severing people's connection with God he could completely control them. In her vision, Harper saw dark forces moving through the cities. Shadowy figures clung to those who accepted the implant, feeding on their fear, resentment, and spiritual emptiness. The implant became a spiritual gateway, allowing these entities to more easily influence human thoughts and emotions. Harper understood that the true battle was for the souls of people. She saw how the implant functioned as a spiritual key, sealing off people's consciousness and distancing them from the presence of God. Initially, its effects were subtle. People felt less inclined to pray, and they began to focus more on material success and the comforts of modern life. But over time, their spiritual connection weakened more and more. As time passed, the effects of the implant deepened. The quest for spiritual truth began to fade. Those who accepted the implant saw their emotions and actions increasingly controlled by the system, and their ability to discern right from wrong became blurred. Morality became fluid, and what once seemed right now appeared indistinguishable from wrong, as the norms were dictated by the system. Harper observed how churches that had embraced the implant began to change. Their congregations grew, but the worship was empty. The focus shifted from true spirituality to social justice, personal success, and acceptance, but without any real spiritual power. Jesus said, "They speak of me, but their hearts are far from me." Meanwhile, the chosen ones continued to resist the system. Harper saw how they were spiritually attacked, targeted by demons trying to influence their minds and emotions with fear, depression, and confusion. However, when they prayed and sought God, these attacks vanished. The light surrounding them was impenetrable. Jesus told Harper, "They will not fight with physical weapons, but with the faith that comes from me. They will be a light in the darkness." Harper understood that the spiritual war was the true reason behind the implantation of this system. The enemy wanted to dominate the souls of humanity, and the implant was the key to that control. By connecting to the system, people distanced themselves from God and their true spiritual essence. The battle now was not only about physically controlling people, but about controlling human consciousness and spirituality. And as darkness spread, a wave of spiritual awakening began to grow. People who had never been interested in religion started having divine dreams and visions. Miraculous healings began to occur spontaneously, and even the youngest started distancing themselves from the system, seeking the truth that once seemed hidden. Harper saw that this spiritual awakening was not limited to a single nation or religious group. It was a global movement that transcended borders, cultures, and beliefs. People of all races and backgrounds were coming together in prayer and meditation, seeking the light that seemed to grow as the darkness deepened. The light was spreading, touching the souls of all who were willing to listen and connect with divine truth. The awakening multiplied rapidly, and people began to see what they had previously been blind to. Those who had accepted the implant started to question it, realizing how it had affected their consciousness and spirituality. The light of the chosen ones illuminated the way, helping others to awaken to the truth. Even amid growing opposition, the prayers and actions of these chosen ones created waves of change, as if the Spirit of God were spreading across the earth, sowing seeds of faith, hope, and light. Jesus had told Harper that the awakening was part of the final plan. Humanity, now divided between those who would submit to the system and those who would choose to trust in God completely, would have to make one final decision, and that choice would determine the fate not only of the earth, but of all spiritual existence. The light would grow stronger as the darkness deepened, and in the end, humanity would need to decide, follow the system or place complete trust in God. The awakening was in progress, and the time to choose had already come.